It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind where everyone's lawn looked the same and every mailbox was painted the same shade of white. The kind of place where the HOA prided itself on perfection. But for Helen Parker, a 68-year-old widow living at the end of Willow Lane, her little porch light was more than decoration. It was a promise. She'd kept that light on every single night since her husband George passed away 5 years ago. He used to tell her, "As long as the porch light's on, I'll find my way home." And even after he was gone, she never turned it off. The neighbors didn't mind, at least not at first. But then came the letter. "Dear Mrs. Parker, your porch light violates the HOA brightness guidelines for exterior illumination. Please dim or remove it within 10 days to avoid penalty." She read it twice, her hands trembling slightly. It wasn't the first notice the HOA had sent over the years, but it was the first one that truly hurt. To her, that light wasn't a bulb. It was memory. Helen didn't fight it right away. She simply folded the paper, placed it on her kitchen counter, and looked out the window. The soft yellow glow from her porch cast a warm circle on the steps. It felt like George was still there. That night she sat in her rocking chair, sipping tea, thinking of all the times George had fixed that light. How he'd climbed the ladder and joke, "It's not just a light, it's our beacon." The next morning, she called the HOA office. "Good morning, this is Helen Parker from 213 Willow Lane," she said softly. "I received a notice about my porch light. Could someone explain the issue?" A young voice answered, "Yes, ma'am, we've had complaints that it's too bright and disturbs the aesthetic at night." Helen paused. "Too bright for who?" The voice hesitated. "Just a few residents, ma'am." Helen thanked them politely and hung up. She didn't argue, that wasn't her way. But that evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, she turned the switch on again. The light glowed warmly, steady and calm. And for a moment, she could almost hear George's laughter drifting through the breeze. A week later, a man in a suit knocked on her door, Mr. Clayton, the HOA president. "Mrs. Parker, I'm afraid I'll have to issue a fine," he said. "We've had continued complaints about your light being too bright after 9 p.m. Helen smiled faintly. "It's been on every night for 40 years, Mr. Clayton. No one ever complained before." "Rules have changed," he replied firmly. "We're standardizing the neighborhood lighting to maintain property values." Her voice stayed calm. "I understand, but this light means something to me." He sighed, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Parker, but we all have to follow the same guidelines." He handed her the fine notice and walked away. Helen looked down at the paper, then up at the light again. She didn't cry, not this time. She simply whispered, "I'm not turning it off, George." A few nights later, a storm rolled through Willow Lane. The rain was heavy, and the streets shimmered under flashes of lightning. Helen sat inside, reading an old letter from her husband, when she thought she heard something outside, a faint crying sound, almost like a child. She opened the door, her porch light cutting through the rain like a beacon. Down the street, she saw a small figure, a little boy, soaked and shivering. "Honey, are you all right?" she called out, rushing over with an umbrella. The boy looked up, tears mixing with rain. "I can't find my house. I was at my friend and got lost." Helen wrapped her arm around him. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. Let's get you dry." She brought him inside, gave him a towel, and called the police to report a lost child. When the officer arrived, he said, "Ma'am, the boy wandered from the next subdivision. We've been looking for him for an hour." The boy turned to Helen and said softly, "I saw your light. It's the only one that was on. That's how I found you." Helen's throat tightened. The officer smiled. "You did a good thing tonight, ma'am." After they left, Helen sat by the window, staring at the porch light still glowing through the rain. She whispered, "Told you it was a beacon, George." The next morning, the the story spread through the neighborhood. By afternoon, everyone on Willow Lane had heard about Mrs. Parker's porch light saving a lost boy. Even Mr. Clayton showed up again, but this time without his clipboard. "Mrs. Parker," he said quietly, "I came to apologize. I had no right to ask you to turn that light off." She nodded gently. "Thank you, Mr. Clayton." He looked up at the porch. "That light, it saved a life." Helen smiled. "Yes, it did, and it's been saving mine for years." Mr. Clayton took a deep breath. "The board voted this morning to make an exception for you. In fact, we'd like to dedicate a small plaque here, if you'll allow it." Helen's eyes glistened. "A plaque?" He nodded. "Something simple, to remind everyone what this light stands for." A week later, the neighborhood gathered in front of Helen's home. There, beside her porch, was a small bronze plaque that read, "The light that never went out, in memory of George Parker, and for all who find their way home." Helen turned on the switch as the sun set, the warm glow falling over the crowd. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly at peace. The neighbors clapped quietly, and one by one, several of them turned on their own porch lights that night, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. On Willow Lane, for the first time in years, the street glowed like a row of tiny stars, a community united by one woman's light. And Helen Parker, sitting in her rocking chair, smiled softly to herself. "See that, George?" she whispered. "Your light's still shining."